Hey, how's it going, fellow city builders, to another episode here on the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, a little bit not of a let's play. I was thinking about as I was working through season 2 of when I first started to learn to play Anno 1800. Um, I guess it wasn't even that long ago, but I put a lot of hours in. But like everybody else, well, maybe not like everybody else, but most people will go to YouTube to try to find like tips and tricks via, a million different ways. And I found other YouTubers who I learned a lot from, but also really just talked about, the best. And it's always like all these legendary items that you just can't get to early game when it's probably the most important, whether you don't have the population or you don't have the money. Um, but did find it was take quite a while to get to some of those items. And while Docklands has changed a lot of my production priorities because you can get stuff in a little bit easier without having to create full supply chains, I really try to leverage the trade unions to produce a little bit more and have more synergy or cooperation between those items and be able to get them earlier without having to rely on missions or special population quests. So stay tuned. Today we're going to be going over my top 5 production chains in early game, and not in any particular order with the exception of number 1. I'm also keeping it items I feel you can get them earlier and more often, where you're just not relying on some lucky mission. If you disagree with any of these, feel free to leave it down in the comment section below with your opinions or your favorite chains and items. So before I get into the first chain that we're going to be talking about today, one thing I wanted to mention is that I'm not going to be able to grade any higher or lower for maintenance reduction or worker reduction. I do feel once you leave early game, that becomes a less of an issue and you don't necessarily have to worry about it near as much as you do in really early game. But you're not messing too much with trade unions and harbor master type items, whether you're using the Docklands building or a harbor master's office. But the first chain we're going to be talking about today is fishing. Now, when Docklands first came out, I saw YouTubers all over the place using it to create a absorbent amount of fish and just trading it all off. While that can be viable, it's kind of not a way I want to play. I do overproduce a little bit to get some extra items that we're going to talk about to trade off or use later in different production chains. So in fishing, one of the first items I try to put in with my, you do need a Docklands wolf for this, unfortunately. You could use a harbor master's office too. I just find it's a little more efficient with the Docklands building. But the first item I tend to use is going to be the veteran whaler. So with the veteran whaler, you get a maintenance reduction, which I guess is okay, but you can get 1 tallow for every 5 processes on your fishing docks. So for a small example, if you have 5 fishing docks for every time they all produce 1, you should get 1 tallow based on averages. So the more you can up your production percentage, especially on these raw items, because you're not waiting for anything else to create them. So with fish, the higher production you have, the lower the production time, the more, quote unquote ticks you're going to get out of it, and you're going to proc, which is just a word where something happens, to get more tallow. The second item I love using is going to be the mother of pearls. She brings a 40% production increase and also 1 tallow for every 4 seconds. So that's helping out how much tallow you can actually bring in even quicker. The last item I tend to use is fine fishing net. Now, I only use this if I haven't finished the Nate's quest yet. If I finish the Nate's quest and I can do transmutation, I will almost always get the sticky claw, which is up on the screen. It gives you just, I think it's 35% extra production. Oh no, it might even be 50%. Yeah, I think it's 50%. But just based on the setup that I've got on the initial setup on the screen with the fine fishing net, you can get an extra 65%, allowing you to gain about 3 fish for every minute or so from a single dock, along with 1 tallow every minute and a half from a single dock. In this particular example that I have set up, with 6 docks, I can push 26 tons of fish and 12 tons of tallow per minute or so. My docks can, they process one every 18 seconds. So you do need to have space. So I guess you do have to spend a little bit on depots up front because you're going to need to be able to store all this stuff. But I love trading off tallow, especially if I'm able to do some stuff with my soap production. On to the next one. So using up some of the benefits that you've gotten from the last production chain, we're going to talk about the soap chain. So using some or all the tallow that you got for free on that last chain, assuming you didn't decide to trade it off, which to be honest would be viable too, especially if you get one particular item. You can get some great value without using your population to actually produce it. The first item we're going to take a second to talk about is going to be the soap maker. She's going to give you a 20% increase in production, and she's a super common item. You find it absolutely constantly in early game, and it's a pretty cheap item, even without the reduction in trade prices. The second's going to be the herbal hygienist. He brings you a 30% increase, and that's really it, but that 30% still does matter. The last one's going to be probably my most used specialist, and you kind of have to pay attention to it and buy it whenever it does pop up, so you're not spending just a ton of money trying to buy it later. But it's going to be Ferris Al-Sarami. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I don't know. But besides his other little minor bonuses, he brings a hefty 50% increase in production. And for this, it's going to total about an 80% increase, getting almost 2 to 1 from this chain for every time the building produces one. There is some wiggle room here. So if you don't plan to use the tallow and you happen to have been lucky to get the Perfumer Prunella, which allows you to use wood instead of tallow, which reduces the cost to produce soap an incredible amount. Personally, I dropped the soap maker to make room for this item as soon as I can find it, as wood is easier to acquire through Docklands. It's cheaper. You can set up chains for it really easy. Plus, there's other items that would actually deal with that chain too to actually increase that. I've also gotten lucky a few times and gotten the melting point apparatus, which would give you another 35%, but it's definitely not as easy to come by, and I've probably only gotten it real early, a small handful of times. So you can either use your tallow from the other chain, you can combine these together, putting them on the same island in the same area, and just kind of use enough of your tallow coming from your docks to supply what you need for your workers. On to the next one. So number 3 on my list is actually a mixed production chain between Windows and carpentry workshops. Later on, you'd probably separate these off or have their own particular areas. But probably the most important piece of this trading union is going to be the Master Craftsman Morris item. His biggest benefit is the free pearls you can get. So for every 4 processes, you get 1 pearl. The next item needs very little introduction, but it's going to be Ferris Al-Sarami. Again, for the same 50% increase. You just can't beat that. Man, I love that item. It's not even that expensive either. It's probably why I like it so much. But the third item can actually be interchanged depending on which one you come across first. So Harker's Electric Lathe gives you an extra 50% production, or the Cabinet Maker for the 30% and a reduction in workforce. I've found it easier to get the Cabinet Maker. I found that one more often, but I've actually gotten Harker's a few times early game. So whichever one you can come by. With this setup, assuming you're unlucky, you would have an 80% increase and would get a pearl on average every 24 seconds from one carpenter and one every minute and a half from a window maker, which is free to do with what you want. I prefer to trade them off, especially early game, until you really need to start making a lot of jewelry. Though I may try and start trading off jewelry down the road here. Give that a try. I personally love to trade off those pearls, so... and the wood if you really wanted to, if you had trouble using it all up fast enough. But it can definitely get you well into late game. So these last 2 chains, number 4 and 5, it's really kind of I really love them both. They're 2 of my favorite ones, especially once I have the workforce to be able to produce them. But they're so versatile and they bring so much to the table, you know, from a value standpoint and from a a personal productive standpoint. But number 4 is gonna have to be the bread chain. So for the first item that I tend to use in this chain, it's going to be the fine cake decorator. She brings a 30% increase in production, but more importantly, she gives you a ton of chocolate. So 1 for every 5 processes, for which me only takes about 90 seconds in this particular setup with specialists and items. So I can produce a lot of chocolate really quickly. And if you get this up early enough, you could have enough chocolate to hold over your later populations before you actually need to actually either create more chains or start trading it to bring it in. The second item is Patissier Patrice. I have no clue if I'm saying that right. People who speak French will probably be able to correct me on that pretty easily. But he gives you a 40% increase on top of this. And last, as you guessed, it's going to be Ferris. With that extra 50%, it gives you such a big bump on top of the amount of raw resources. Yeah, he's so valuable on some of the raw resources because you can bring them in and you're not waiting on something else. So with the bread maker, you know, waiting on flour, need grain. But if you put Ferris on ores, you know, he can just produce as much as you want. You're actually getting more value out of that. But in this particular setup, I'm getting about 120%, doubling my basic production. And with the electricity, I could be producing bread at over 3 tons per minute and getting about a chocolate every 90 seconds just from just one bakery for both of those. In this particular setup of 7 bakeries, I can produce 22 tons of bread and 4 tons of chocolate every minute. It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. I do need to be better about trading off my bread. I'm probably going to turn that into a trade item at some point. Because I feel like I always have extra on it. All right, and for my number 1 personal favorite chain in relatively early game is going to be sand quarries. So the star of this particular trade union and really what makes it so special is going to be Grigor the geologist. He brings free electricity, doubling the output of a raw resource. So this isn't dependent on anything. It's really just dependent on the amount of space you have. So anything that you get more raw resources faster is super valuable, super productive, and worth the trade. He also brings the benefit of getting 1 pearl for every 4 processes. The second item in this little setup is going to be my favorite and shouldn't be any surprise. It's going to be Feralus Alzarami again for the sweet 50% increase. The last piece is going to be the quarry foreman for another 30%, making the total increase of 180%, nearly doubling it with electricity. Well, doubling even the electric amount when you think about it, allowing for about 1 ton of sand for every 10 seconds or 6 tons every minute. You're also getting about 1 pearl every 2 minutes from a single wharf. So in this particular setup, I can get per minute. Well, no, I wouldn't say per minute, but in between Captain Tobias picking up, I can get about 210 pearls and 854 sand in that amount of time, using like that 30-minute, or so estimate between pickups. But I can get about 15 pearls per minute and about 180 sand, depending on how fast you want to go. If you finish the Nate's chain, you could set up a harbor. Like, I haven't used the Docklands in this particular setup, but I've been using the harbor. So if you actually have finished off Nate's quest, you could have a trade union, and then you can use the harbor master to get the sticky claws and transmute that from Nate for another 35% on top. So you can just create an incredible amount of pearls out of here to be able to trade off. But that's going to be my somewhat top 5 in mostly no particular order. Production chain setups that I use in my playthroughs to be able to create a little more production, a little extra value out of my builds. Even though they're ugly, but they're productive. So thanks for checking out the little bit of a tutorial I'm creating. It's a little bit different than what I normally create for the channel, but it's something I enjoy doing, and I am kind of a numbers geek. feel free to leave any of your comments down in the comments section below. You can also join the Discord. There is a link to it there. Any other little tutorials you'd like me to take a look at, or things that you think my opinion would be value on, leave it in the comment section. But until next time, take care of yourselves. Towel out.